Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to today's podcast session for The Library is Open. My name is Jessica Zero, and I am one of your hosts, along with Nate Karula. Hi, Nate.
Hey,
Today we have with us Rob Hilliker from Hotchkiss School. Hey, Rob.
Good to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. So, Rob, why don't we kick this off? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I've worked in a lot of different libraries and a lot of different roles over the past 8 years or so, or gosh, we're coming up 9 years since I started at Rutgers, where I was in acquisitions. And, I did my library degree at Rutgers. My role previous to coming to Hotchkiss, I was at the Center for Digital Research and Scholarship at Columbia. And right now I'm the library director at the Hotchkiss School, which is a boarding school of about 600 students up in the southern Berkshires. So beautiful and very different from working in the city, especially being a boarding campus. Get to work really closely with the students, and they spend a lot of time in the library. So it's a lot of fun.
awesome. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experience in using your previous system? And, just kind of touch on what made you switch to open source.
Absolutely. Well, so during my time at Columbia, I was running Academic Commons, which was the institutional repository, and that was my first real experience with open source software. And I really learned a lot in that role, and really came to appreciate the value of community around healthy open source software really involves a community. I think that for us was a big factor in our shift here at Hotchkiss. We'd been using Millennium for some time and it worked fine, but really the model was, in my mind, broken in the sense that, we were just totally dependent on whatever I decided was the next improvement or the next thing. And we really didn't have any sense of control or direction over our own system. And so to be able to, have an option like Quahog out there that's an open source system, and be able to, have some role in saying, well, gosh, this improvement would be good or that improvement would be good, and also be part of a community where other people are coming up with ideas for how to improve the system. I mean, there's just a huge step forward. So I think, when we did our RFP, we really didn't know that we would be going with Quahog. It was sort of the dark horse, I've said this before, we were looking pretty seriously at OCLC's system, because again, that was a sense of community, right? We're part of OCLC. It's all these libraries and librarians working together. But because Quahog is open source, it adds an extra level of freedom, right? OCLC was still, as we found out, driving the boat, and they're doing good things. It's not a bad system, but it's not one where we have that role in the community. And that's really the open source difference, in my mind. I mean, I think the other thing, that I take from my time at Columbia, because we weren't just doing open source, we were also doing open access and really open culture more broadly. And, one of the things that I learned there was the role actually of third-party providers, or whatever you want to call them, of companies like Bywater, to actually be able to flourish in an environment like that. Because, you guys, right, this is your pitch, this is your thing, you can focus on the service and give the best service to your customers, and you don't need to worry about all the other stuff. I mean, I remember hearing from folks, that a third of the cost of running, for example, subscription journal or some sort of, right, anything where you're trying to close off access, a third of the cost is keeping people out. I mean, if you think about how much money is going into closing things, open them up, and it makes everything that better for everybody. It actually makes for more business. Frankly, I think it's a better business model, and certainly it works better for us. So, yeah.
We used to call them anti-features.
Right. Yeah.
Time into developing anti-features. It's just counterintuitive.
Well, that's it. I mean, when you've got a business model where you charge people for something you've already developed, you charge them extra every year. That's that's not sustainable. That's just punishing your users.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was what drove us to look to make a switch,
Mm-hmm.
was that sense of being locked in and being sort of held over the barrel and seeing how much money they could shake loose. That's not the business we're in here. You know, we want to get the best resources for our users, for our
Yeah.
patrons, and being able to come to some of the Quahog meetings and meet other libraries and learn from what they're doing, and not just learn from them, but then know that we could do that tomorrow and it doesn't cost us extra money, right? It's
Yeah.
not that they're paying for some feature we don't have access to.
Yeah.
We don't pay for it. That's an empowering thing. So, yeah.
So Rob, talk to us. How'd you set the stage and get ready for the change and the implementation for Koha in your library?
Sure. You know, we really tried to be very, very thorough and very, I mean, we followed, the script that you guys gave us to a T in terms of doing, testing.
Mm-hmm.
We broke it up between, we've got a pretty good sized staff here. We got a team of 10, and most of our folks have library degrees. So they're really pretty knowledgeable. They know their way around the system. I mean, and everybody had been involved in using the previous system pretty intensively. So, gave everybody a role and said, okay, run through the test system, try everything out, make sure you know what you need to do. And it was really, they did a pretty awesome job. I mean, Patricia, who doesn't work here anymore, but who was our administrative librarian at that point in time, actually, we picked up some bugs right when we were even doing the training with Ed. We submitted stuff to Bugzilla right then and there because they were really getting into the details and the nitty-gritty. So we were pretty prepared. I mean, I think the other part was preparing our users, and the easy part there was, frankly, our previous system, nobody could log in. Like, nobody knew how to log in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you needed to know your library card number, and nobody knew what that was. And you needed to format your name, like last name, comma, first name. And if you didn't do it right, it didn't work. I mean, just nobody ever logged in. So taking advantage of those features, was just brand new for everybody. So it was introducing people to stuff that felt totally brand new. And that was just exciting for them.
Yeah.
Excellent. So how about the reception of your new catalog, which you call Bearcat?
Yeah.
How did the students react when you brought it online?
Well, let me tell you, when we brought it online, it was pretty awesome. I mean, I introduced it. I went to an auditorium, and all the students are there, and I did a little PowerPoint, and then we did a live demo. And I had some students, I had the school presidents come up and do like a test search just to show what it would look like. And then I showed them the shelf browse feature with the cover flow there. When I introduced that, the students literally stood up and clapped and applauded and cheered. It was ridiculous.
I love that.
I have never, ever seen high school kids applaud an OPAC. Like, that just, it's not supposed to happen, right? But it did. It was real. And, I think the kids who had used the old Bearcat, right, the previous OPAC, it was night and day for them. So the fact that they could, find stuff so easily, see covers, it's much more visual, right? Mm-hmm. It's a much cleaner look. And then that on top of that, they could log in and renew their books and place hold requests. And actually the biggest thing for us, one of the custom tweaks that we had you guys do for us on the OPAC was to push the purchase requests right into the front menu. And so that purchase requests, I mean, it's one of the most popular pages actually on the site. People have been making purchase requests like crazy, which is great for us because then we know what people want to read and we can get it for them. And they know that they can come to us and it's as easy as going to Amazon. Yeah. And it's faster and it's free, you know? So,
you guys were using a Google form before that, right?
That's right. We had a Google form and it worked okay. You know, frankly, it was a little complicated, I think, and we simplified it, but it still was not obvious to people that they could make a purchase request. Yeah. So in the OPAC, it's right there up front, purchase request. And, you know, people, faculty and students alike are using it. In fact, even the librarians use it, which drives, you know, our purchasing person a little crazy. Everything shows up in this giant number of books that I need to order. Couldn't they like do it, you know? So, but no, it's a huge success. I mean, we've had hundreds of requests since we went live through that purchase request. So that's a huge step forward, you know. And the other really nice thing about the OPAC, I don't think we ever made a single change to the OPAC, the old OPAC, you know, on our old system, because it was so freaking difficult to get in and actually change anything. And now we have the ability, you know, either through a ticket or through doing it ourselves to make a simple change really quickly and to even make more complicated changes happen. I mean, you know, here in Connecticut, the Connecticut Library Consortium has this discount pricing with StackMap, right? And these folks, you know, you give them your shelf ranges, right? They come, they do a single on-site visit to just, you know, check everything out. And then they create a map of your entire library that's plugged into your catalog. So when somebody looks up something, they just hit the map it button and boom, it's there. And to be able to know that that integration would be A, possible, but, you know, B, actually pretty seamless. Again, that's a huge thing coming from a system that couldn't handle, right? That's one of the advantages of open is you know what you're working with, you know where the hooks are to hook things in, you know, it just makes that kind of integration that much easier.
It also allows us as a vendor to better integrate with these third-party companies and form partnerships and things like that. Based on your relationship with StackMap, we're actually across the hall from them at one of our conferences.
Oh, no way.
Just to talk with them, and we talked about, you know, your implementation, and, you know, we're working towards better integration with that company
awesome.
To have it easier, you know, more pluggable with
Absolutely.
because of your experience. So it's pretty cool.
Well, and that's, Nate, that's exactly what I, you know, meant when we were talking about, you know, the community aspect of open source, because you're in a position where any kind of partnership you do like that just enhances Quahog and then encourages people to work with you as a vendor. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. Instead of, you know, if you were running a closed system, you'd be looking to, you know, buy these guys out and be the only ones who had StackMap. I mean, it's just such a different mindset that you get into. And so the mindset of openness really creates for that healthy community where, you know, everybody's helping everybody up.
Yeah, and it doesn't, like, I mean, in a proprietary environment, they would probably charge StackMap to integrate with their system.
Right, or that's the other,
And they would also charge their customers to be able to integrate with that system. So yeah, we're able to do it without charging anybody anything. I mean, you have to pay for the service, but that's a separate, it doesn't have anything to do with your ILS, you know?
Exactly. We pay StackMap for their service, we pay you for your service, and we're done. You're not paying,
That model doesn't make any sense to me. These residual add-ons for nothing, you know, it's just an excuse to charge more. So
absolutely.
So this is a kind of a good segue onto our next question. Rob, you've been kind of traveling a little bit this year and presenting at a few library conferences, both about Quahog and your library itself. Talk to us a little bit how your presentations have been perceived by the attendees talking about the switch to open source. You know, a lot of times we get questions about fear sometimes, you know, making the switch, and, you know, what has your perception been?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. People are afraid of what they don't know, and they're afraid of taking ownership of their ILS in a
Yes.
way.
Yep.
I mean, you see it all the time in different ways, right? But certainly, in the library world, people, I think for a long time have been used to just sort of, well, you outsource that, right? You have one systems guy in-house, and then you have the, vendor outside, and the systems guy handles all the conversations with them. And, then you don't think about it that much. But the symptom of not thinking about it that much, I mean, it's a digital age. So actually, if you're not on top of what your ILS is, you're missing out on the best opportunity, I think, to engage with your users.
Yeah.
Certainly one of the best. And so, I mean, we did that presentation together, you and I, at the LibTechConf in Minnesota. And I think, what I heard there really, was that, but also the curiosity is growing.
Yes.
And there's a sense of, well, what does it mean to go to Quahog and be open source, but then have this hosting and support provider? That model, I think, really appeals to people because, you look at a project like the one when I was at Columbia on the Academic Commons, we were part of a consortium of libraries working with Blacklight, which is an open source, discovery layer. And, we had probably 4 or 5 full-time computer programmers who spent a good chunk of time working on customizing that for us. That's not a model that's going to work for everybody. So for people who that's their experience of what open source means, they're nervous. I don't want to hire a bunch of computer programmers. That's not my area of expertise. We can hire you guys to do the hosting and to manage the process of, bringing enhancements into Quahog and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And that's a model that makes sense to people. And hopefully, that's what we're seeing, right? I mean, people that we've talked to, they're calling you guys up, they're signing contracts, which is great. It's, it's a win for you guys. It's a win for them because they get a good service provider and a good new ILS. And it's a win for us because the community is growing. And especially when, as an independent school, I mean, we certainly weren't the first. We had Loomis Chafee down the road from us, joined you guys before we did, and others in other places, I'm sure. But now that there's this groundswell of momentum and all these schools coming on board, now we can start to put our heads together and say, well, what sorts of features really are going to appeal to our users? Are there things that we could be, collectively funding improvements to Quahog that are really going to meet, or even just sharing notes, frankly, on, well, how did you implement this and how did you implement that? What kinds of reports are you running? I mean, all that sort of, shop talk stuff that librarians, like to get into, but it's all about serving our users.
Really, one thing I absolutely love about the Quahog community is just how much they share to help other librarians help their patrons, their students. Just at Quahog US last week, so many people are like, here, let me share that report with you. I have that on my system already. Or their printer receipts, they were saying, oh, look, did you know you could add this to the bottom of it? And I mean, they were just sharing it back and forth. And that, to me, is just so powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, well, and, even thinking about, I mean, we went to the regional meeting down in Farmington, I think, and,
the summit.
Hearing about the way they used RFID and things like that. I mean, it just opens your eyes to new ideas. And again, ideas that you can implement because you're not having to pay your vendor, X thousands of dollars just to have, turn on some RFID enabling feature that's already there. They just, they control the switch, right? I mean, that's one of the coolest things about Quahog is, if you peek in that administrative section, there are all these switches and you can flip them yourself. You don't need to, maybe some of them you don't want to, but that's a different question. And that's why we have you guys to support us. And if we accidentally take something down or whatever, right, we can get it back up. But, obviously, the idea that, the system is ours, right? we're just paying you for support. That's super empowering. And, and then that it's ours collectively through the community, even better. I mean, yeah.
All right, Rob, what's next on your project list?
There are just so many different projects. We've been doing a lot of physical renovations to the library. We just hauled out a couple of shelf ranges. We've got some new furniture coming in. We got our maker space starting to come online. A Glow Forge, hopefully arriving soon. So I don't know if you guys have seen the Glow Forge, but it's this cool desktop laser cutter.
Cool.
It was started as a crowd-funded thing on Kickstarter. Anyways, there's a lot of that kind of stuff in terms of the OPAC and in terms of Quahog. Actually, we just had our authority files redone, so you guys are about to reload them for us, so that'll be good. Better searching, that's library geek stuff, though, and not a big deal for other folks, I suppose. But and then, I think we're looking forward to introducing StackMap to the community, because it got implemented right at the end of the last school year, so most people aren't aware it exists.
Cool.
I'm trying to think if there were a couple of other new features. I think one of the big pushes for us that we've been holding off on is pushing on the user tagging and list making. Mm-hmm. And I think we've reached the point where enough people have expressed interest in that, particularly among the faculty, that that it's something we can have a critical mass to push it out and really introduce it and have people take it up. One of the ideas that's been floating in the back of my mind for a long time, since I was at Rutgers, I read an article about a library in Amsterdam that instead of using digital user tags, they had physical user tags. So what they did was they had different return slots, depending on what, like if you thought something was a good read, then you'd put it in the slot that said a good read, right?
Cool.
And so they did like a physical version of that. And I've been thinking about stickers, and if people could like put a sticker on the book of them when they return it and have it translate into a tag in the system.
Cool.
Then that'd be a cool sort of bridge of the physical and digital. And that's why, I know some people thought it was silly, but, we were excited about the idea of emoji tagging. So I'm excited to see, that go forward. And, the fact that something like that seems kind of superficial and silly actually ties to this deeper question of, full Unicode compliance is in the database is kind of cool. It kind of points out that, sometimes things that seem superficial actually have important underpin.
I think that pushing more of a social interaction aspect in the catalog is key. I would honestly love to see some kind of ability to hook up with friends and see their reading history in the future, things like that. Can you comment on that at all? Do you think the social networking aspect is something that's important to incorporate into the catalog?
I think social reading is, it's really, it's where people are going, and you see things like Goodreads and what have you, and whether it's, integrations with that kind of social reading, I think for me, the reviews are another area. I think the difficult thing at a high school is sort of bridging this space between, privacy and sociability or social networking. Where we've sort of treaded softly on that, and we've anonymized our users' borrowing history. But again, that's something where if they have control over the data, their data, right? And I definitely think that's an exciting area. One of the things that the last conference I presented at, I actually talked about recreational reading in teenagers and some of the programs we've done to try and promote that here. And I think the biggest thing we've seen is when you can add a social element to sharing about, well, what am I reading, or what, we go to the bookstore in town and we actually buy the books that the kids pick at the bookstore and let them take them home. We slap a barcode on them so they bring them back to the library when they're done. But that whole social interaction around the books really drives people. They're looking for recommendations. What are my friends reading? What do they like? Maybe I'll like that too. I mean, that's I think the more we can bring that into the catalog with lists and things being shared and tags, that allow people to sort of say, this is a good read, right? Check this one out. That will,
cool.
That will be a win.
Awesome. So what kind of advice would you give to listeners today that are considering a move to open source?
I mean, my biggest thing would be, consider your resources and think about what kind of commitment are you prepared to, well, first of all, what kind of commitment are you already making to your current ILS, right? If you're paying $50,000 a year for your current ILS, you could spend that money better, because if you go open source, the hosting and support costs are going to be less, almost guaranteed. And then there's other things you could be doing with that money, whether it's improving that system itself, putting money into enhancements, whether it's putting money into integrating with other systems. I mean, I guess the number one thing for me would be look at the opportunities, right? And know that you will then control the system. You will own it. Now, if you're afraid of that, that's where, they should be talking to you guys or other, another vendor deals with support for open source systems, because having third-party support providers takes that fear away, right? I know that you guys have our backs. You guys are going to keep our system up and running. You're going to manage the upgrades. If we have a report that we can't figure out how to tweak, we, put it in a ticket and it gets addressed. And so I think know that you have that backstop available if you partner with a company like Bywater that provides support and hosting services. So, but maybe if you're a bigger, library with a systems department, maybe you want to self-host. Maybe you want to self-host plus some support, right? There's different, I guess, just know that you can be flexible, right? If you're working with a proprietary ILS provider, you're not experiencing flexibility right now. I can almost guarantee it. So just that opening your mind to the range of possibilities is be my number one piece of advice.
Yeah.
They really are wider than you might be aware.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Well, Rob, always inspiring to talk to you. Thanks for joining us today for our podcast for The Library is Open. It's always exciting to hear what's going on and see what you guys are doing. Nate, thank you today for our session. And we look forward to talking to everybody on our next session of The Library is Open. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks.
Nate.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Jesse.
Bye, guys.